Absolutely. This is one of the most mind-bending, suspense-packed masterpieces in the history of horror cinema. To fully understand it, I pulled 3 all-nighters in a row. It nearly fried my brain. Seriously, my mind was running on fumes by the end. But then, when I finally understood the ending, that god-tier twist, at that moment, it was like my soul exploded with satisfaction.
Pure cinematic bliss.
This film? It's none other than the legendary suspense thriller that earned its divine status 16 years ago, a high-rated, mind-twisting beast of a movie. The story begins. A young boy with autism is startled by something. In a panic, he knocks over a can of paint, spilling it all over the floor. But instead of comfort, his mother lashes out. She beats him cold, unrelenting. Terrified, the boy runs away. Now alone, Jessie, a single mother, kneels down, silently scrubbing the paint off the floor. And just then, ding-dong, the doorbell rings. Disheveled, stressed, and still catching her breath, she hurries to open the door, but no one's there. The house is still, the air strangely heavy. She checks the time. 8:30 a.m. Almost time for her planned boat trip with friends. Without giving a second thought to her son's emotional state, she brushes it off and moves on. Jessie, still determined to keep the plans, forces her son to come along. She hastily packs a few clothes. Then the two of them get in the car and head toward the marina. The boy sits in silence the whole way. Not a single word. His silence, unnerving. But things get even stranger. When they finally arrive at the dock, Jessie is suddenly alone. Her son nowhere to be seen. One of the friends, Victor, walks up behind her. "Victor, where's your son?" Jessie stands there, silent. 20 seconds pass before she finally replies. Jessie softly. "He went to school." Victor frowns. It's clearly the weekend, there's no school today. But he doesn't press her. When they reach the sailboat, the captain, Greg, who's organizing the trip, greets Victor first. Greg, cheerful. "Hey, glad you made it." But then, something even stranger happens. Jessie, who had always rejected Greg's romantic advances, suddenly steps forward and hugs him. Jessie softly, almost trembling. "I'm sorry." Greg freezes, completely caught off guard. He searches her face, confused. To him, this feels off, unnatural. He assumes something's wrong again with Jessie's autistic son. Greg, gently. "If it's a bad time, we can reschedule." But Jessie looks up, eyes filled with a quiet desperation. Jessie firmly. "No, we go today." She doesn't budge. She needs this trip. Greg, still unsure, nods anyway. What none of them know is, a nightmare is about to begin. First, everything seems perfect. The sky is clear, the sea calm, and the group relaxes into the peaceful rhythm of the waves. Laughter, sunlight, a moment of ease. But suddenly, the wind stops. Just like that, the sea goes completely still. Too still. The air changes. The silence is heavy, unnatural. Something isn't right. Even the waves that were rolling just moments ago suddenly flatten. The sea becomes a perfect mirror. Still, silent, and unnervingly smooth. This eerie phenomenon sends a chill down everyone's spine. But for Greg, a man with over a decade of sailing experience, it's unthinkable. Greg muttering, This isn't natural." And then, it gets worse. Up ahead, without warning, a massive black cloud appears on the horizon, racing toward them at a terrifying speed. The sky darkens. Winds whip out of nowhere. Waves rise wild and angry. A storm is coming. Fast. Panic sets in. Greg rushes to the boat's radio, trying to call the Coast Guard. Greg urgent, shouting, "Mayday, mayday. This is the Elis, we need assistance. Repeat, we need..." Static. No response. The radio's dead. All he can hear barely is the faint voice of a woman. Woman's voice, faint, crackling through static. "Help me, please." The sound is distant, fragile, like it's coming from somewhere else entirely. Everyone stares at the black cloud barreling toward them, and the nightmare has only just begun. But when Greg tries again to contact the Coast Guard, it's already too late. Outside, the black cloud has arrived, dragging with it a towering wall of water, dozens of meters high, crashing toward them like a monster from the deep. Greg's face goes pale. Greg shouting, "Everyone, life vests now. Get below deck." Panic erupts. People scramble to grab life jackets and rush below as the storm howls above them. Greg and Victor stay behind on deck, one at the helm, gripping the wheel with white knuckles, the other managing the sails, desperately trying to keep the ship stable. The waves grow larger, relentless. Victor yelling over the wind, "We need to cut it loose. It's too much." With no other choice, Victor pulls a knife from his belt and slashes the rigging, hoping it will keep the sailboat from capsizing in the storm winds. But it's not enough. The sea answers with fury. A wave hundreds of meters high rises like a mountain over the boat, and in the blink of an eye, the entire vessel is swallowed whole, dragged into the dark depths of the ocean. Silence. Then, nothing but the sound of the storm. Miraculously, they survived. Though bruised, shaken, and soaked to the bone, 5 of them managed to pull themselves onto the splintered remains of the wrecked sailboat. But not everyone made it. One girl, the one who had been wearing the straw hat, was gone, claimed by the sea. They could only watch as her hat floated off, spinning slowly on the surface, then vanishing beneath a wave. Hours passed. The ocean calm again. The storm gone, as if it had never been there. Everything was quiet, too quiet. Only the sound of seagulls, dozens of them, circling above, their cries sharp and unnerving. They weren't flying aimlessly. They were waiting, watching, as if expecting the survivors to die. Then, a deep, mechanical roar echoed across the sea. Jessie looked up sharply. Jessie squinting. "Do you hear that?" From the horizon, slowly emerging through the mist, came a massive steam-powered ocean liner, ancient and towering, cutting through the water like a ghost. The group stared in disbelief, relief, hope, desperation all at once. They had just seen death, and now it felt like they were seeing salvation. Victor, voice cracking, "We're saved." They scrambled to wave and shout, as if this ship was their last lifeline. They had no idea what was waiting for them on board. Victor's voice cuts through Jessie's swirling thoughts. He's just noticed something on the wall, painting, and it's not just any image. It's the ship itself. Victor reads aloud. The ship's name is Elis, built in 1932. He pauses, eyes narrowing. Elis, the god of winds in Greek mythology. Jessie listens as Victor continues. His son, Sisyphus, was punished for cheating death, condemned to push a giant boulder up a hill, only to have it roll back down each time, forced to start again, endlessly. Before they can react further, a sharp, vibrant sound cuts through the silence, an unexpected noise that grabs everyone's attention. Victor moves toward the sound, but all he finds is a set of keys lying on the floor. He picks them up, confused. Jessie takes the keys in her hand. Her breath catches. Her whole body goes numb. The keys, they belong to Jessie. At first, everyone thought he was joking. But then, Jessie flipped the keychain over, and inside was a photo. His son's face. The room fell silent. This bizarre, impossible discovery was only the beginning. Moments later, the group found themselves inside an ornately decorated banquet hall. The place looked ready for a grand celebration. with musical instruments neatly arranged, and tables adorned with fresh, perfectly prepared fruit. It was as if a magnificent concert or feast was about to begin, but no one was there.
No guests, no musicians, no servers.
Just silence. Even more strangely, Victor glanced at his watch. Victor, confused. It's 11 o'clock now, but according to their watches, it should be much later. Time was slipping away, and reality was starting to unravel. But Jesse's watch and the grand clock on the banquet hall wall both stopped at exactly 8:17. This strange anomaly sent a chill straight down their spines. The group exchanged uneasy glances, whispering nervously among themselves. Suddenly, a breath, shallow and quick, came from behind Jesse. He spun around. In the shadowed corner, a dark figure lurked. Victor was the first to react, chasing after the mysterious silhouette without hesitation. Greg, unable to shake his worry, followed close behind. Jesse, burning with curiosity, decided to join them, so the three set off together, leaving behind only the timid Donnie and his wife, who stayed behind, anxiously waiting in the eerie silence. But they hadn't gone far when a strange sound drifted from room 237, the unmistakable trickle of flowing water. Greg cautiously pushed open the door. The room was empty, but on the bathroom mirror, written in what looked like fresh blood, were the chilling words, "Go to the theater." The eerie message sent a shiver down Jesse's already fearful spine. He wanted to leave this haunted ship immediately, but Greg wasn't convinced. Greg, skeptical. It's probably just some bored crew playing a prank. Their disagreement quickly escalated into a heated argument. Because Jesse's son has autism, he is especially sensitive to harsh or careless words, to anything that hints at abnormality in the mind. Greg suddenly realized his earlier words were too heavy, too cruel. But it was already too late. The damage was done. The two parted ways, each lost in their own thoughts. Jesse returned alone to the banquet hall, hoping it was a life-or-death struggle. Suddenly, as if guided by instinct, Jesse knew exactly where Victor's injury was, at the back of his head. With all his strength, he bit down, surprisingly killing Victor in the process. Staring at his fallen friend's lifeless body, Jesse was overwhelmed with guilt and shock. He didn't know what to do. Then, a gunshot rang out from behind. Jesse spun around, searching for the source of the sound. He rushed toward it and found himself in a theater. There, Donnie's wife was holding a pigeon, wounded, pierced by several bullets. Suddenly, the real killer appeared. Each shot fired was deadly accurate, striking Donnie's wife again and again. Both of them fell, their breaths fading fast. Only Jesse managed to escape, barely, darting toward the deck. But no sooner had he reached the wooden planks than the killer struck from behind. Jesse was knocked to the ground. Desperate, he begged, "Please, don't shoot. I have a child waiting for me at home." But instead of mercy, those words only hardened the killer's resolve. With cold determination, the trigger was pulled. Jesse grabbed the gun barrel fiercely, as if he somehow knew the shooter's firing sequence. He dodged several shots in rapid succession, then, with a sudden burst of strength, knocked the killer to the ground. Without wasting a second, Jesse leapt down to the lower deck, successfully evading the first deadly chase. Jesse circled around from behind, confident his plan was flawless. But the killer saw right through it. He was already there, waiting. With no chance to escape, Jesse decided to face him head-on. Fueled by fierce determination, Jesse fought like a warrior possessed. After several brutal exchanges, he disarmed him. The camera followed Jesse's gaze, turning toward the world reflected in the mirror. He stared at the left side of his face, lost in thought, his expression growing distant. Suddenly, the eerie silence was broken. A faint cry for help drifted in from the fog outside. But notice, the camera no longer follows Jesse. New Jesse appears on the overturned vessel, as if everything that happened before had been reset. From this moment on, the film's most mind-blowing concept is about to begin. Everyone keep up with my pace, and slowly enjoy watching the terrified Jesse raise his gun and walk back. Notice, at this point, the jade scar on his face is still missing. But the moment he returns inside, seen it happen. But in the chaos of the moment, Jesse loses control. He shoves Victor back, and Victor's head slams into an iron spike jutting from the wall behind him. A sickening crunch. Blood. Stillness. Jesse stares, horrified. Jesse whispers, "No, no, no, no. Now we understand." This is why, in the first loop, Victor immediately tried to strangle Jesse on sight. Because he remembered. Shaking with fear and guilt, Jesse stumbles away through the dim corridors until he finds himself inside what looks like an old security station. Breathing heavily, he slumps down, confused, broken, trembling. Jesse softly, "Why are they coming back? Why do they keep dying and returning?" He doesn't know it yet, but he's trapped in a nightmare far crueler than death. Jesse stares blankly at the dusty security room walls, his hands still shaking from what just happened. His mind is spiraling. None of it makes sense. Jesse, to himself, voice trembling. Why do they all come back? And why don't they remember anything? Worse still, there are now two versions of himself on this ship. Each just as real. Each just as lost. Even if he ran out now. Jesse's breathing grows louder. Eyes widen. Sweat beads down. He's trapped. Alone. And on the brink of madness. Jesse stumbles backward into the dim, claustrophobic security room. His eyes drift downward and freeze. The floor is covered wall to wall with countless slips of paper, each scrawled in a frantic, slanted hand. Each one reads the same terrifying sentence. If they board the ship, kill them all. Jesse's breath catches in his throat. He kneels, trembling, and picks one up. Then another. Then another. They're all the same. And the handwriting, Jesse, voice cracking. "This looks like mine." He grabs a nearby pen and scribbles the same words onto a fresh sheet. Exact match. Even the stroke order, the way he curves his S, the slight drag on the L. It's identical. It's his own handwriting. The room starts spinning. Logic unravels. Jesse's grip loosens, and the paper falls from his hands. Jesse whispers, "What the hell is happening to me?" He turns sure of himself and his son. He stares at it, heart hammering in his chest. But before he can process it, clink, the necklace slips from his fingers. He watches it fall through the grate and disappear into the darkness. But the darkness below isn't empty. His eyes widen. Down there, trying to block the screams welling in his throat. He's caught in a loop, and it might never end. Finally, it hits her. Jesse's eyes blaze, not with fear, but with something colder, harder. Jesse, low, steely whisper, "Forget the myths. Forget the rules. I just want to go home and see my son. That's all. I'm sorry." She starts the hunt. First stop, she corners Victor, calm, calculated, merciless, gun cocked. Then, she steps into the hallway and blocks the path of the new Jesse, the version of herself just entering the loop. Two Jessies, face to face, one terrified and confused, the other ice cold, finger trembling on the trigger. Jesse to her other self, "If I end you, maybe this all ends with you." She raises the gun. Fingers twitch. Breath catches in her throat. But just as she's about to pull the trigger, her eyes fill with tears. Her hands begin to shake. Jesse softly, I can't." The weight of it all, the hopelessness, the moral collapse, the broken logic, it hits her like a flood. Jesse screaming, "What do you want from me?" She drops the gun. The loop continues. But something has changed in her eyes. Part of her has died. Another part is just beginning to awaken. Jess was no longer focused on killing. She now wanted to lead everyone out of this haunted place. To earn the trust of the Downey couple, she even handed over her gun without hesitation. Soon after, she returned to the banquet hall, hoping to bring the injured Victor with her, but he was gone. All that was left was a trail of blood on the floor, drag marks. Following the gruesome trail, Jess stepped out onto the deck, and then, boom, a gunshot shattered the silence. Startled, Jess rushed back inside. Her heart was racing. It was Donnie. He had fired the shot. Apparently, rushing to the scene, our main protagonist, lead Jess, and the one who had just boarded the ship earlier with the others, newbie Jess. Back to ultimate Jess. She approached the Downey couple, pretending to be lead Jess, and calmly lied to them. Victor jumped overboard chasing someone. He's gone. But the couple wasn't convinced. How do we know you didn't kill him? Why should we trust you? Ultimate Jess didn't flinch. You don't want to die, do you? Then stay with me. The dazed and confused Downey couple just blindly followed Ultimate Jess. Then, the three of them walked into room 237. But the moment they stepped inside, Ultimate Jess suddenly pulled out a dagger, slashing Downey's neck in one swift move, then plunged the knife into Downey's wife. Hearing the blood-curdling screams, lead Jess immediately charged over. Only Downey's wife, Leisha, was left alive. She managed to pull out 5 bullets and kept moving, spinning around the room. Finally, she reached the ship's communication room. Using the radio, she desperately sent out an SOS. Outside, a new storm was brewing. A tsunami was approaching, cutting off all contact. Back here, the main Jess finally found Leisha, but what she saw made her break out in a cold sweat. The deck was covered, absolutely packed, with Leisha's corpses. This proved that this cycle had into a dead end. This was a scene she had experienced before. At this moment, main Jess finally understood the rules of the loop. There had always been 3 Jesses on the ship, from start to finish. And every time rookie Jess kills Ultimate Jess, the main Jess then levels up to become the new Ultimate Jess, while rookie Jess takes over as the main Jess. Only when everyone on the ship is dead does a new cycle begin, meaning a completely new group of 5, reset and fresh, will board the ship again. The truth was brutal and devastating for Jess. At first, he refused to accept the cruel reality of this endless loop. All he wanted was for the ship to stop, so he could rush home and see his son. But no matter what he tried, the ship would never stop. After a long moment, Jess finally came to understand. He knew the only way to get home was to kill everyone. So he started setting a trap. First, he returned to room 237 where he had killed Donnie, dragged the body and threw it into the sea. That's why earlier we saw the seagulls tearing Donnie's body apart. Next, Jess wrote the words "Go blame" on the mirror, then moved Victor's corpse away. After that, he went to the banquet hall, calling the new Donnie couple to go with him to blame Victor, and later to the security room to prepare weapons and clothes. He put on the mask. This became the ultimate Jess we saw earlier. Now, as long as he kills everyone, there's a chance to finally break the cycle, or at least uncover the truth behind it. So Jess followed Gray up to the second floor of the theater. But when it came time to pull the trigger again, no matter what, he just couldn't bring himself to shoot. After all, they had known each other for more than 10 years, and Gray was even Jess's admirer. But then, surprisingly, Gray recognized the masked man as Jess, just by the way he wrote. In the end, Jess finally pulled the trigger. Then, in sequence, he killed Tony and his wife. What happened next was different from before, a fight for survival. The newbie Jess knocked the masked ultimate Jess into the sea. But from this point on, the rules of the cycle changed again. The Jess who fell into the sea was unexpectedly washed ashore. He looked at himself, finally free from that terrifying cruise ship. Hurriedly, he ran back home, just wanting to see his beloved son as soon as possible. But when he got home, he realized that besides the blooming sea flowers, unexpectedly, there was another version of himself. A completely new Jess who hadn't even set sail yet. For a moment, she was so scared that she stepped back, not knowing how to explain this to her child. But then the child smiled so harshly. So he made a bold decision. He rang the doorbell, and while the Jess inside the house stepped out, he sneaked into the storage room and grabbed a hammer. When the other Jess came back inside, he barged in and swung the hammer with all his might. The entire scene was witnessed by the child, who was already struggling with autism and was terrified. But looking at the woman in front of him, she was clearly his mother too. Still, he held the other tightly. Jess also promised the child that from now on, he would love him dearly and never lose his temper again. It seemed like life was finally starting to move in a better direction. Moments later, Jess grabbed a black bag and placed the other Jess's body inside. He also took back the special necklaces that belonged to himself and his child. Then, he covered the body with a jacket and shoes and placed it in the trunk of the car. On his way to dispose of the body, suddenly a seagull smashed against the car window. Jess had no choice but to pull over to the roadside. He walked over, picked up the dead seagull, and prepared to throw it into the sea. Seeing so many seagull carcasses in the same place, a chilling sense of doom welled up inside him. It turned out Jess was still trapped in the cycle, refusing to accept the cruel reality. Panicked, he quickly started the car and drove away from there. But just as he left, the child suddenly pointed at the bloodstains on the car window and started screaming wildly. Already overwhelmed and distressed, Jess could only turn around to comfort the child. Suddenly, due to inertia, the car skidded dozens of meters before finally stopped. Words. Jess promised she would come back. But the moment she stepped out of the car, it was as if all the sorrow and disappointment from before had been completely wiped away. Her face turned calm, almost detached, as she walked toward the dock. Just like at the very beginning of the movie, Victor suddenly appeared behind her. He asked softly, "Why didn't you bring your child with you?" Jess stood there, silent. The question hung heavy in the air. She didn't answer for over 20 seconds. Finally, with a voice full of guilt and sorrow, she replied quietly, "He's just sleeping. He's fine." But the truth was her child had just died in that car crash. From this moment on, the atmosphere shifted. It felt as if Jess's memories had been reset. Everything that happened afterward began playing out exactly like the opening of the film. She boarded the ship again. The cycle began anew, an endless loop. At this point, many viewers probably had a ton of questions. So let me offer a simple interpretation. Hopefully, it'll help you see this film in a whole new light. In fact, the real story should be this. That day, Jess was driving her son to the harbor for a fun day out on the sea. But on the way, they got into a terrible car accident. Both mother and son died. However, at the core of her son's death was her own carelessness behind the wheel. She took her eyes off the road to calm her child, and tragedy struck. Racked with unbearable guilt and regret, Jess's obsessive longing for redemption twisted her soul. She became death, and was cursed to push a boulder up a hill for eternity, only to have it roll back down each time. Jess's punishment? To be trapped in an endless loop, forever reliving the pain and terror, always almost saving her son, but never succeeding. And maybe, just maybe, we are all Jess in some way, caught in our own cycles of regret, guilt, and the refusal to let go. Trapped in the endless cycle of life, you scroll on your phone late into the night, promising yourself, "Tomorrow I'll sleep early." But when tomorrow comes, you fall right back into the same loop. Another night, another promise broken. Life, this terrifying cruise ship. Endless corridors, familiar regrets, the illusion of progress but always back to the start. So the question is, when will you finally get off the ship? When will you break free from the loop? Or will you, like Jess, keep running in circles, chasing a version of peace that always slips through your fingers?